Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I am, as always, honored and excited to get to host another Power to Fly virtual event. Now, my pronouns are she, her, and hers. If you'd like a visual descriptor, I'm a 29-year-old white woman, blue glasses, black baseball hat, white sweatshirt. Now, as we go through today's upcoming event, I'm super excited to be hosting. We're going to be discussing Ready or Not 2026 is here, priorities and challenges for the new year with Rob Ribar, who is our Director of Events and Marketing for Power to Fly. Now, as we go through, I do just want to briefly flash our code of conduct on the screen. It looks like a big scary wall of legalese, but what it boils down to is let's treat each other kindly. As long as you operate from a place of kindness and respect, it's pretty hard to go wrong from there. But if you have other questions, you want further details on this, please feel free to reach out to us. You can either DM me. You can find my name, Meg Alexander, in the drop down in your Zoom group chat. You can always also email our help desk inbox if you have further questions. That email is hi@powertofly.com. All right. Now, in case y'all are unclear about Power to Fly, who we are a women-led company. We're backed by Morgan Stanley with over 200 million plus professionals in our network and data-driven impact on success. Now, our mission is to help organizations to attract top talent and to retain engaged employees with solutions that simplify recruitment, enhance employee satisfaction, as well as drive long-term business success. Now, if you are looking to earn SHRM credits for this conversation that we're about to have, you will want to refer to the slide in front of you. Your SHRM code is 26-2JVY6. All right, now, very excited to introduce you to the man of the hour. Rob Ribar is our Director of Events and Marketing. He is a New York-based professional with over 15 years of experience in programming inclusive content, community engagement, executing dynamic events, and comprehensive marketing campaigns. Now, Rob currently leads PowerFly's marketing and events, including our year-long virtual summit series. And at PowerFly, Rob has produced events for American Express, Meta, Morgan Stanley, Microsoft, and Slack, just to name a few. Now, prior to joining PowerFly, Rob served as a production coordinator at DKC/Hangar 4, working on events for Pixar, Jaguar, Land Rover, FanDuel, L'Oreal, and producing the reopening of the Hudson Theater on Broadway. Rob, very excited to welcome you to the stage and get to share the stage with you today. What else would you like our audience members to know before we dive on into conversation?
I've been here at Power to Fly for about 8 years. I think when we started, we had done maybe a handful of events total, and now we do pretty much an event at least once a week. Meg, you host a lot of them, so yeah, we've grown a lot over the course of the 8 years, and hopefully there's many more to come.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to take a step back. I'll have your slides ready to go. Just give me a high sign when you'd like the slides changed.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Meg, and thank you everyone for joining. So I'm going to walk us through some slides, and then I'm going to take some questions that you all submitted in advance. But if you have some live questions, feel free to put those into the chat. But first up, I just want to acknowledge that 2025 was definitely a heavy year for leaders, or really for everyone, I think. And if I had to have one word to sum up 2025, I think it would be pressure. Some of the key realities that leaders had to navigate in 2025 were geopolitical instability and economic slowdowns across the regions, really around the world, rapid AI adoption that really outpaced governance and readiness for that, and regulatory shifts impacting hiring, immigration, and labor models, such as maybe moving away from traditional terms such as DEI. Just some data points to share with you all. 71% of CEOs said 2025 was more complex than any prior year. And that's according to PwC. And I mean, just take that into account that the vast majority of CEOs said last year was the most complex year. And then global GDP growth slowed to around 2.5% in 2025. And whenever that happens, that's increasing cost pressures and scrutinies. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And let's talk about some trends from last year. So, number one trend, I think everyone will be in agreement with this, was that it was the undeniable beginning or entering of or embracing of the age of AI. So AI really moved from being an experiment, I would say, maybe in prior years, to really being core to the infrastructure. I know many of us went from probably maybe using it, maybe just having heard of it, to really using it every day. And let's look at some of those stats. 88% of organizations used AI in at least one function in 2025. That was up from 78% in 2024, according to McKinsey. 92% of respondents plan to increase AI investment over the next few years, so pretty close to 100% there. And HR and recruiting shifted towards fully AI enabled workforces. So if we have any talent recruiters on the line, you'll know that you're using AI, I'm sure, in many cases now to handle your workloads. If any individual contributors or folks looking for job opportunities are on the line, you might have expressed some frustration with the fact that, oh, am I getting through kind of the AI there? And this all exposed some challenges. So automation scaled faster, really, than trust skills and the ethical guardrails that are needed. And now leaders and really everyone faces the question, where does human judgment matter most? So again, going back to applications, for example, if we're using AI, where does the human come in to ultimately make that decision? Let's talk about some more trends on the next slide. So this was really that 2025, despite kind of the emphasis on AI, also really re-centered people. So what do I mean by this? So technology advanced, but humanity really became the differentiator. So in one way, upskilling really surged. A lack of learning opportunities was actually the number two reason employees changed jobs in 2025, according to our own survey here at PowerToFly. And demand really expanded beyond just tech into other leadership and, quote unquote, soft skills as well. In the age of AI, human skills really did gain value. So, emotional intelligence, empathy, and collaboration all ranked among the fastest growing leadership skills, according to both Forbes and McKinsey. And employees favored leaders who prioritized psychological safety. And that's definitely one of the big terms of 2025 in the workplace that I think will continue in 2026. And then lastly, as I kind of mentioned a bit before, we saw DEIB really evolve. So the World Economic Forum reported a shift from representation metrics. So, how many women do you have maybe working at your company, to really a focus on well-being, around retention, and around overall performance. And DEI was really reframed as a business and culture strategy, not necessarily a standalone initiative. Definitely mixed, feelings on those things, but it's undeniable that we saw a massive shift there. So let's shift to talking about 2026 on this next slide. What is the 2026 outlook? Well, I think 2026 isn't really just a reset, it's a reckoning. And leaders and companies are walking into AI being embedded deeply into daily work, not just workflows, talent markets that are tightening around skills, not titles, employees expecting growth, flexibility, and meaning. Again, going back to upskilling being the number two reason people are leaving work, is not getting that upskilling and career development. And greater scrutiny around how values show up in practice. So again, maybe not just looking at, DEI as just being a checkbox, but really something that people are actively looking at. How does that affect, or any kind of cultural value affect, the company? And really, there's a reality check there, because 75% of HR leaders say that their organizations are not fully ready for the future of work, according to Gartner. and take that as maybe being AI, being a reset around skills. But it's very telling that three-quarters of the HR leaders that responded say, yeah, they're just not ready. Okay, so we talked about some 2025 trends. So let's talk about some 2026 trends. So first up is that we're really seeing a shift from tools to teammates, especially in terms of AI, and from credentials into capabilities in terms of skill sets. So there's AI the ally, and Microsoft predicts in 2026, or that 2026 will be the start of the true human AI collaboration, with AI becoming a team member supporting decision making and not replacing it. Again, going back to that idea of retaining that human touch. We are undeniably now also in a skill-based economy. What does this mean? It's employers increasingly prioritizing assessments over resumes. And LinkedIn reports skills data is now 5 times more predictive of job success than education. And actually, we've seen a lot of our clients and our partners here moving away from those education requirements and more towards that skills based hiring. And then lastly, there is this leadership challenge. It's redesigning roles, it's redesigning hiring, performance models, all around skills and not these legacy structures that we've had for quite some time. And I'll wrap up here before we move into some questions with just a few more trends from 2026. And let's start with leadership. So Gartner predicts empathy and adaptability will be top 3 HR priorities in 2026. Conscious human-centered leadership will really become a competitive advantage. So again, even in the age of AI, that human-centered leadership is so key. We're going to continue to see DEI and inclusion redefined, inclusion being measured by experience and belonging and not just by headcount, and a people's first culture that really outperforms on engagement and retention. And then lastly, upskilling really as a form of retention. So 94% of employees say they stay at a company that invests in learning, according to LinkedIn. And learning really is part of the job and not just a perk. And we'll definitely continue to see this not only in AI and technical skills, but in those human people skills as well. So I hope that was helpful to give you a little sense of where we're coming from in 2025 and what we're seeing now in 2026. And Meg, I'd love for you to come on back and maybe we can take some questions that we had submitted. And if anyone has any live questions now, feel free to add those to the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Like I said, we do have a bunch of questions we're going to start with, but if you are here today, we want to make sure that we prioritize that, and we reward you for spending time with Power to Fly. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat. If you have any questions that you would like to raise, but you want to be kept anonymous, no problems. Just DM your question to me, and I will make sure that your question is raised. All right. Now, okay, one big challenge right now are outside distractions, of which there are
Yes.
tons, no matter where you are located on the planet currently. So it's really hard not to just kind of refresh the news to try and stay up to date, especially since feeling uninformed can feel even scarier.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to companies who want to prioritize employee engagement while not being blind to reality?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that I've talked to some of our partners about is that they're recommending to their teams not to avoid the news, because again, as you said, sometimes that can be worse. And also, it's the reality. You can't not avoid it. But to recommend the folks to really have those be at very specific times. So, for example, like, why don't you start the day by looking at it and then don't look at it again until like later in the day? So, like, know that you can be informed, and obviously, if there's something really happening in breaking news, to address that, but really encouraging teams to compartmentalize that into certain times of the day. And then I think the other thing that people can do is have realistic conversations in the workplace about it. This is where your employee resource groups can come in, your mentorship groups can come in. Like when, for example, when we talked to some partners and there was like the day of strikes last year, last week, that a lot of the companies had a very realistic conversation with people where it's like, you know what? We're all adults. If you choose not to come in, you choose not to come in. If you choose to come in, then that's great too. Like just putting it out there where it's like y'all are adults. You can make the right decisions and that we don't need to kind of babysit you as being your managers or being the overarching company.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think it's also, especially the idea of sort of kind of being more intentional with when you check into the news can help, as somebody who struggles with their mental health a lot, and the news has a big part to do with that. It is a really weird war, right? You don't want to be uninformed, but checking all throughout the day is a very easy way for at least me to very much dysregulate myself. So I very much appreciate this advice as well, where it's like, listen, I'm gonna be updated like first thing in the morning. I get to kind of see what new fires sprang up overnight. And then towards the end of the day, I'll check in like after work, after dinner usually is when I do it. But I think that's really, really good advice. And I very much appreciate the advice to not, you know, don't try and turn a blind eye and pretend it's not happening just because it's a very awkward thing to talk about, you know. All right, we had a couple questions from the chat. I'm going to hold on some of those because I want to kind of try and group them together a little bit. My next question, in uncertain markets, which let's be real, everything's uncertain at the moment, companies often freeze hiring, but skills gaps remain. What do you think is the smarter play in 2026?
Well, I think this is where so much of the points that I made in the presentation kind of really come into play. So I think this is where upskilling, we're really going to be seeing at the very top. So I think if you're a company and you're freezing hiring right now or pulling back on hiring, what you can do and is what's probably a much smarter use of your money is reinvesting in the education of the team that you currently have. And again, that could mean AI skills, that could mean soft skills, people skills. And if you don't have a lot of money, then start with free resources. I mean, there's no shortage of YouTube videos and tutorials and things that we have here at PowerToFly that are 100% free that you can share around. And then if you're able to, investing in paid resources to keep those skills up. Because if you're doing more with less, you need to make sure that the team feels one, that they are adequately able to do those extra jobs that you're asking of them, and two, that they're finding compensation for it, which might not be monetary compensation, but then it might be skills based compensation and learning those new skills on the company dime. So I think when times are tougher and you're not seeing the hiring, continuing to reinvest there is not only going to help your retention, it's ultimately going to help you serve your clients or serve the public even more.
I've always thought this was an excellent time for cross training, like and
Yes.
learning what happens all throughout the team. Honestly, places that I've worked that were not necessarily in a hiring freeze, but we're just like, yeah, and this is where we are right now, and we're not expanding, but here's where we are. That's something that I have always very much appreciated was when they were like, listen, do you know how to do that person's job? You don't have to do that person's job, but we want to make sure that you know how to just in case something were to happen.
Yeah.
And even if it wasn't skills that I then used at that job, they are skills that I have used at later jobs. So I very much appreciate that.
And
I like
from
that.
our community, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot, Meg, on our events as well, I don't think I've ever heard more in my ears here of people wanting to job pivot as well. People who are in marketing, but they want to move into tech or vice versa. And I think all that, the way to do that, or at least to start your journey on that, is going and learning what your colleagues are doing and doing that cross training that you're mentioning.
Yeah. Okay. We got a question from the chat. I think it's a really good one. Chris Grimaldo had asked, could you give an example of prioritizing skill over education in a CV or an online portfolio? Obviously this is a little off where we are currently in the subject, but I thought this was a really good question. I didn't want to let it go. If could you give us an example of how you've seen that
Yeah,
be
well,
well
I think
communicated?
there's a couple of different ways. I think from a, if you're on the technical realm, then definitely having that your portfolio, as you said, your online portfolio there of your past work being very key. And one thing that we're doing with our partners at Skill Crush are portfolio reviews. So I think people are looking more and more, not just at your traditional resume or your LinkedIn or your PowerToFly profile, but looking at actual tangible examples, especially say if you're working in AI, for example, they want to see how you've done that. If you're not in kind of the technical world, which certainly I'm not, I think the big ways to show this is to actually focus more on what kind of growth and impact that you had. So not just saying, I did such and such, but I did such and such, and that resulted in a 50% increase in sales, or that resulted in a 50% increase of email clicks. So I think like making sure that you're putting tangible numbers onto those things. And then lastly, I think, and this certainly is education, but I think more and more people are also looking beyond traditional education, university, colleges, and into other certificate programs or other events that you've joined? Have you gone? Have you spoken at a conference on X topic? Have you even just gone to those to keep your skills up? How are you consuming? How are you staying? And maybe that's not something that goes on your CV, but like when you're getting into the interview saying like, well, I listen to this podcast, I read this newsletter, like this is how I'm staying up to date on what's happening, because you might have graduated from college like 20 years ago and the times have changed. But like if you're listening to like this tech podcast every week, make sure that you're telling an interviewer that. And I think if you're on the other end, if you are an interviewer, if you're in recruiter, like that's a great question to ask. Like, how are you staying up to date on everything that's happening in tech rather than just looking, oh, this person went to such and such college. Of course they must know about this.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a really good, honestly, I think this is a good thing to point out, right? Is that like when we are talking about skills over education, all we're discussing is whether you are listing like a certification or a degree or something versus if you are extrapolating and showing what that skill was, how you used it, not here's the piece of paper that says I have it, right?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I just, one podcast I listen to every week is Pivot with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher, great tech podcast, business podcast. And I just was in a meeting with our CEO this week, and I said, by the way, I was just listening on to this podcast, and Google still, there's all this emphasis on AI search. But I said, they talked about the findings that Google search still accounts for 90 to 95% of search, and like that's not something I would have known if I hadn't like taken in this podcast. And I'm sure there's lots of papers out there, but anywhere that you can kind of get a distillation of this information is great. And then letting people know, oh, this is what I do, this is where I take it from.
Yeah, I like this. Okay. All right. Now, AI adoption is rapidly outpacing governance and readiness. So, I'm getting visions of like the dot-com bubble
Yes.
over here,
Uh-huh.
but
Yes.
for people who like for companies who are intent on trying to involve AI in their business model, but they don't want to like make missteps. How can you kind of keep up the pace without or while worrying about, are we making a misstep here?
Yeah, and first off, I definitely think we'll be seeing some kind of .com bubble burst, is similar to as you kind of just mentioned, which is only to say, not that that means AI is going away. It's not, but that's just to say that the tool you're using today might not be around, 6 months from now. And I'm even talking about some probably pretty substantial tools that are out there.
Yeah.
So you definitely have to be willing to change and learn new tools. But I think the number one thing that I would recommend to companies, and if there's individual contributors listening, like to have them recommend this to companies, is to have some kind of rules of engagement, basically, that the company adopts. And that this is something that everyone across the board has to abide by. So, like, these are the AI tools that we're using. If you want to use other stuff in your own time and experiment, that's great. But like company wide, company accounts, these are the tools. You like, do not put X information into those tools. Don't put, people's email addresses and whatnot, things like that.
Yeah.
Like, and but I think it's important to have this all written down because a lot of us are still being thrown or were and still are thrown into the deep end of the pool of like use AI now, you must use it, but they were done that without really being told how to use it. And I think we've talked about before at other Power to Fly events, like you're not going to break AI, have fun, play around with it, but at the same time, if you're working for a specific company, you have to have those safeguards in place from like a big overarching. So if your company doesn't have that, I would definitely go and say, you know what, let's just write down the 10 things that we're going to do. And in some cases, you might want to even post those publicly just so people know, like, hey, we're going to use AI for recruiting, for example, like just so people know, but you don't have to tell them the ins and outs of how it's going to be used, but just so people know that it is being used there.
Yeah, I think you're right. That transparency is massive because you don't want people to kind of feel bait and switched or, feel like anything was like snuck in. But yeah, I agree. You want people to feel informed. And I mean, really, it just makes sense. How many policies do companies have in place that like you've never actually accessed, nobody really reads them, but it's just a good idea. Have it on paper. Think about, give it a couple minutes of a think of like, or what should we have, kind of baseline written down. Um, we've got a really good question from the chat here. MM Brownson asks, how can AI help in quality assurance? Is there any AI tool for e-commerce companies on agent response to customer ticket quality? Yeah, I know that because I've sat in and listened on to events like this. But what would you say to MM? Like if
Well,
you
you
are
can answer
thinking
the
about
second
AI,
part because I don't know. As a marketing and events director, that's not kind of in my wheelhouse. But in terms of the quality assurance, one thing I would say is again, always need the human touch there afterwards. But on top of that, I would say to run anything you're being generated from AI into another actual generative AI model as well. So if you're generating something in ChatGPT, you might actually also want to run it through Claude as well and to like catch other things. So I don't have those two be almost in conversation with each other because again, these are different LLMs and they're learning, so you're going to get different results from each. But in terms of but Megan, do you have anything else to add to the other part of the question?
okay, so I can't drop names because it's been 4 weeks since this chat, but I know that we had a chat. So while we're going over the next question, I'm gonna try and find the
Okay.
link to that so I can share it with everybody because it was a community chat. I know that for sure. Um, ooh, okay, this is a good one. LaJoy is asking, how do you bring up that you know about AI integrations during an interview if you're not asked?
I would bring it up. Like, I mean, it seems like it's not. I mean, usually an interviewer I feel like is going to have a section where it's like, is there anything else that you want us to know about you? So I think that's a great place to bring it up. The other thing is I would, going back to what we've talked about previously, have a spot in your portfolio or on your CV where this is mentioned. Because if it's not mentioned there, they're probably not going to bring it up. But if it's mentioned in your Power to Fly profile, whatnot, um, that then I would 100% make sure that you are including it on there as well. And then yeah, I think these are meant to be conversations, right? Like that's what we
Mhm.
forget. Like that we're always thinking sometimes of it as an interrogation and not a conversation, but make sure that if there's something you want to bring up that you're bringing it up, and I'm sure that ultimately the interviewer is going to be like, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I completely forgot to do it myself.
Yes. Well, and truly, this is one of those things where, like, and it's an interview. You are meant to be tooting your own horn. That's literally the whole point of the thing. It can feel awkward, yes, because it's not a thing that we do in like social conversation generally, but like bring it up. Hey, you want to know all the things that I know? You didn't ask about this, but this is absolutely something that you should
Mhm.
know about me. And then maybe even that's the way to do it. Hey, we haven't really had a chance to discuss AI integration. It's been a big topic thus far. What does it mean for your organization? I am very interested because I know about blah, 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 blah.
Well, and
Like
I
that's
think
a,
what you just said there,
yeah,
Meg, is the key also. And I should have even mentioned this. Yeah, to always tie it back to the organization. Like, what is your company doing on AI integration? Or going back to what I just said in terms of like having a AI code of conduct, more or less. Like, it's not out of bounds to say, especially if you're applying for a role where AI is going to be a heavy part of it, just saying, hey, what are your guidelines at X company for AI across the board? Like, are there challenges that you face? I think always throwing it back to learning more about the company and having the company kind of respond to that is definitely key.
yeah, absolutely. All right, that is going to bring us to the end of our half hour. If there's anything, if people are only taking one thing from today's conversation, what do you want the one thing they remember from today to be?
Oh gosh. Well, I think that 2025 felt like it was kind of laying the ground seeds for a lot of stuff that we're going to be fully exploring in 2026. Whether that was, starting to integrate AI into the workplace, but now it really being a coworker, from really understanding the emphasis on skills and upskilling to now it being something that is 100% essential. So regardless, I think everything we kind of started to see in 2025 is going to come to more fruition in 2026. Not that there won't be more hurdles, more roadblocks on the way, but I think this is going to be a very illuminating year after kind of last year being a bit more of a exploratory year.
Yeah, I like that. All right, y'all. That is going to be it for us today. Remember, if you would like to earn SHRM credits for today's event, you're going to want to take a look at the code that's on the slide in front of you. We'll also make sure that this is on the YouTube channel as well. So just make sure that if you need those SHRM credits, this is the code you remember to grab. That's going to be it for us today. But thank you all so, so much for taking time out of your day to spend with Power to Fly. Rob, I very much appreciate this time spent with you. I always enjoy, getting to learn from you. So thank you very much for taking this time out of your day and sharing with us.
Thank you all, and thank you all. And as I mentioned, we have events here all the time. So come on back, and Meg and I will hopefully see you again. So until
Yeah.
then, have a great rest of your day and do something for yourself.
Yeah.